I do want to say thank you for joining us tonight. And the really great thing is this is our first one where we're going to have multiple people presenting all in one evening. So yay for experimentation through Zoom. Someone just asked me what raspberry framboise is. It is a Belgian beer, and it's quite fruity. I highly recommend it. They do not make it in Wisconsin that I know of. Oh no, I do think it's made in Wisconsin somewhere. But anyway, highly recommended for all those out there. So each person is going to speak for about 15 minutes. And we're really excited because they each have a different take on the wood type making process. And one of the things that we're very lucky is that we have such a wonderful community, and there is more than one person doing this, right? That we can share and keep this craft alive is really exciting. So I'm glad that all four of them decided to join us, and we're going to get 4 different perspectives. But the other wonderful thing is it's a tiny, tight-knit community. So I know they all chat with each other, and many of the people here on the call have talked to them about this process before. The exciting thing is we're going to learn a lot more, see a lot more, and get a little bit behind the scenes, which is great. I'm really glad we could do this. We are going to save the questions for at the end, because that's a really nice way. At the end. At the end. Bum, bum, bum. So they'll each have 15 minutes, and they will talk about their process and share. And then at the end, we'll do question and answer time. So if you don't have your refreshments, you still have time to get it, so you can be quite joyful and jovial during question and answer time. Let's see, we also always have to remind everyone that this is being recorded. So friendly reminder that you are being recorded. So if you've ever been on the chats before, they are pretty informal, but while we have people presenting, we do ask that you mute, because that allows the person who's presenting to be front and center. And I'm actually going to go through and spotlight the individual that's speaking at the time so that we can see what they are doing. So without further ado, I'm going to do a short little introduction so that you know where they're at. And then as we hand off, they'll tell you a little bit more about themselves. So tonight we have Rob, and he is in Muncie, Indiana. Rob Miller is from Tribune Showprint. He's going to start us off, but I'll go through the other 3 because we've got 4 very knowledgeable wood type people with us tonight. The second one is Scott Moore from Moore Wood Type. He is in Columbus, Ohio, and this is his 10th year. Congratulations, Scott. We also have Jerry McCormick, and she is in Rochester, New York, and this is also her 10th year. 10 years ago was a very good time for wood type producers getting started. Yay! And Jerry again is from Virgin Wood Type. And then we have Tammy and Adam Wynn from Red Door Press, and they are in Des Moines, Iowa. So we've got a nice little Midwest East Coast spattering for you to bring you more information about wood type and how wood type is made. So Rob, if you want to start us off, I will gladly hand it over.
All right, can everyone see this slide thingy? Yeah. All right, so before we owned Tribune, Kim and I had this basement print shop. And yes, I did drag a C&P down here in pieces, and yes, it's still there, and it'll probably be there when I die. On the right there is the Vandercook that I bought for $50 from my employer and drug home, and what started it all. Yes, this is also a polyhemus cabinet that I destroyed and took down into the basement as well. Screen printing side. And so we were doing fine in the basement and having a good time, and wanted to start experimenting with wood type, and it's too expensive. I think a lot of you find that it seems very expensive, and it doesn't seem expensive now that I see what work goes into it, but at the time I thought I can make this cheaper. So without really talking to anyone, because I'm an idiot, it's a common theme, I jumped in and bought this CNC machine from China. So this is it now. It's heavily modified from when I bought it, but this is the CNC 3040 that I bought about 6 years ago to make wood type for Kim. And interesting fact is, I think I made the first wood type with this machine maybe 2 years ago, so it took a while. Then we bought Tribune. So this took us a few years to get our feet on the ground and settled, and the CNC machine kind of just sat in the back and didn't do much. Once we kind of figured out what we were doing, we were able to start making plating. And that's really what we did with the CNC machine for quite a while. So we made a lot of just things that would be considered cuts or poster additions in the shop. The CNC made it really nice in-house. You could machine something very quickly. It does very detailed work too. This is 36-point type. Then I got to know Heather Mulder, and we designed this. And this is some digital wood type adapter is what Heather and I were calling it, but lets you do URLs. And we designed it so that it makes almost like a marquee. This is one of the first pieces of actual wood type that I've made. And then this is what a lot of people will know me from. This is the stack of plywood that I cut to make all of the steamroller wood type that I brought down to the APA Ways Goose that Hatch hosted. It's a streamer Tuscan, about 10.5 inches tall. As far as I know, it's the only purpose-made steamroller type that exists. Here's a 1 star out of the star bar that I made compared to a real star bar. For those of you who haven't seen it printed, this is what it looked like. Everything you see here except for the hot dog was carved CNC. Heather Mulder, Kim, and I carved this hot dog with the Wessel router at Hatch the week that we were down there. And when I got back from that, I was like, I really want to do more with the CNC machine. So I set about finally getting it to make accurate type height blocks. So this is kind of early experimentation. I modified the CNC machine about 50 times to get to this. So this is how I currently make wood type blinks. These are actually turning blinks that I cut these out of for making table legs. It's a really good source of maple if you just want a little bit to experiment with. It's more advisable to buy maple from somewhere local in bigger quantities you're making a lot of type, but this gave me enough to do a lot of experiments with. Here's some early slabbing. Here's one of the finished slabs. This is my homemade drum sander. Unlike Scott's, you kind of got to push everything through it, but it'll get you there. This is some of my first finished wood type blinks. And then I started cutting with this and realized that I hate the CNC machine for making detailed things. It's slow, takes forever. Cellini likes to make fun of how slow it goes. So I finally listened to Scott and started talking to Scott more, and he was kind enough to give me a pantograph. This is kind of what it looked like. I've been kind of modifying it more, and we'll get to that. So this is a TX series Hermes engravograph. This is kind of like the special model that has the ability to engrave bottles and things like that. And kind of looking for parts and looking for ideas, I stumbled across the IX series arms. So the upper arm here is an IX series pantograph arm, and below is the TX series arm that was on the pantograph that Scott gave me. So my recent work has been building an adapter to marry the two. Oh, the other sweet thing about the IR series one that I have is it came from Hughes Aircraft Company, and it was used to engrave cockpit markings. So it's super cool. It's going to be making wood type next. So I'm really fortunate. I have access to a state-of-the-art makerspace. These are the adapters that I made to mount the IR series arms onto the TX. These are spring steel. These are actually cut out of an old galley tray. Don't tell Kim. Here's some acrylic. Yeah, it's a new lightweight galley now. These are acrylic spacers. So when you mount it all up, it looks like this. So this is the kind of the offset of the new system. So this is where the machine sits today. COVID slowed me down a lot on this. I have a really good friend here that owns a metal shop, and he's going to be making these Pantographs tables for me. So I'll have two of these, one that's 50% the size of this one. And this is where you'll mount the patterns and the target wood to be cut with. So they'll be mounted on these arms. Here's some more pictures of the Pantograph. This Pantograph, I found out that Hamilton bought a similar TX series Pantograph, and it didn't have a motor. So I've been kind of Craigslist searching, and I found this one that's a complete machine, and I kind of fell in love with it. It's very portable. It's very small. So I think I'm going to also build this one out to a full Pantograph. But the reason I show this is if anyone else is interested in doing this, these Pantographs, their end mills take a very proprietary end mill. And I've come up with a way using some Chinese components. This is a collet system that my CNC router uses. You'll see it there. But it's very standard. They're available from China. And I made an adapter that will let you put these onto the Hermes engraving machines. So I am going to document all this and share it with everyone. Stephanie, I have one of these for you guys that I built for your Pantograph as well.
That's so exciting. We're so excited about that.
Yeah. So that's me. So hopefully, assuming my friend's metal shop gets back open, I'll be posting more photos of how this machine's going. But I need some tables, and I'll be cutting type. So very exciting times for me. Like I said, the machine's done. The CNC machine's great. I plan on continuing to use that as my block leveler. It's really, really nice for making cuts that I wouldn't want to make a pantograph pattern for. But this is kind of the future of what I plan on doing, is kind of a hybrid approach where I can use both machines. So that's it for me. If you want to follow what I'm working on at any time, it's Butterpress Rob on Instagram. I don't really post on any other social media, but that's kind of where I'm at.
I just shared that in the chat for everyone. And if you guys do have questions, save them, because we're going to have everybody present, and then we'll have them be asked at the end. So get a pad of paper, and that way you can write down your thoughts. You can also chat if you have a really pressing question, but that's what we'll do at the end. Thank you, Rob. We are now moving to Scott Moore in Ohio. So Scott is going to share his screen, and we're going to see a little bit from him.
Good job, Dad. Good job, Rob.
I'm working on it.
You're good.
You cleaned your desktop for everyone.
I know.
It's crazy.
I got criticized. So. It's all right. Just see if they get any more free type. That's fine. I'll remember that. That's underneath the share screen. Okay, I'm sorry. I am in the basement, and so I do not have a big walking show. I have done several short movies, and I'll have to go through these 3 or 4 short movies, and I'm going to explain what I've learned and how I've learned. So please bear with me. I didn't edit it. Okay, so we go to view, fit full screen, right? Enter full screen. Ah, life is good. Here we go.
My type shop is in the basement, unlike everyone else who has beautiful working space and lots of natural windows. My wife's let me take over about 2/3 of the basement for type and machinery and processing and shipping. Here you see the woodworking tools. Again, as a retired industrial arts teacher, I needed woodworking tools, which are also overlapped sometimes into the type making tools. So as you come in the door, everything is on casters because I have to roll things out. There's an 8-inch bench grinder for sharpening tools and for making steel stamps, a belt and disc sander for sanding wood and making fine angles. Next to that, a drill press. And next to that, a 13-inch planer, DeWalt planer that I use for surfacing wood for other projects and to make side grain wood much closer to type high, so I don't have as much waste on the block level or in the garage. I have a router table that I use for cutting little slots in the side of the maple slabs so they don't warp, and most of the time it's covered with patterns and type. There are some borders I'm working on and some ornaments. My pantograph, my small line pantograph, lives here by the window, and it does, I have 3 pantographs actually. That's my #1 small pantograph. Then I have my Hammond glider in the corner next to it. Again, it's like the kitchen. You want to make a little triangle, pantograph, trim saw, bandsaw. I brought this down in pieces and put it back together. I have a woodworking jointer that I use for getting things down to line size and for preparing material. I have some new safety devices added to it. I have an industrial dust system in the corner for the big dust. And I have a bandsaw. Right now it's actually set up for making strips out of Amish beams, and I left that on there stopped so you can see it. Then I have another room, and in between the room I have my Hammond, my Vandercook plate gauge, my homemade drum sander, and then you get over to my workbench, my table saw, which is actually covered most of the time and used for preparation and work.
Good. All right. So now I need to get back to where I was. Say escape. No. How do I get off of this?
My type shop is in.
No.
Escape.
Escape.
Yep. There you go.
Okay. The next PowerPoint I'm going to show you is the things that I have learned. And then we have 2 more other short videos, and then I'm going to do some special details with you. I am going to go ahead and try and cut a piece of type for you. So let's see if this works. Let me go to slideshow. Oh, we do you. Oh, well, we do slideshow, play from start. Again, I'm in my basement. I love this picture for me. It shows off those beautiful blue eyes that I got from my father and that Aaron has for me. I like this corner. It's nice. I can come down here and if I want to work for 6 hours, I do. And if I don't want to work, then I go upstairs. What? My wife's stomping on the floor above me. I have learned lots of things in 10 years. I've started with Norb and Jim Moran and went through, and almost half of the people in the hang are people that have given me advice or given me information. I'm just kind of gathering what everyone knew 100 years ago. Everyone knew, and I'm trying to gather all this information and then put it back out to share. I did go ahead and use the 2 sentences in the one book and had maple trees cut, frozen in February, and here you see me doing a really scary bandsaw cut. And I laid these out and did not know how to stick them, so I stacked them like I would flat wood and ran the fan too long one day and ruined 200 of them, were ruined. So I had to go back out to the frozen ones and start again. And this time I controlled it more, and I wrote it all down, so I knew the exact drawing process. I also have been lucky enough to teach workshops at different colleges and book art centers and universities. I believe this one is one of the ladies of letterpress at Mount Pleasant. And again, I really love this. I retired 8 years ago, and I'm back teaching again. I love teaching. But again, I tend to haul things. So I have patterns I take and blocks, and it's slowly been building and building. Here you see when I first started out, I used to make my patterns with my vinyl sign making machine because I could reflect it and then use hand tools to make the patterns. I went ahead and after doing some trees, went ahead and found out that up at Kime Lumber in Kime Lumber in Charm, Ohio. I'm sorry. In Charm, Ohio, the Amish sell 2-inch and 3-inch great big long maple beams that I can cut up, glue together, and make my type. So I still have the half rounds, and I do use them once in a while, but This has been a nice source. It's hard to find 2-inch and 3-inch kiln dried wood. So this is a tub that's been cut into strips, and then it sits for 2 weeks to see if anything cracks. There's always internal stress in the kiln dried. Here you see me gluing up some 3-inch wide blocks. These are for an engraver. That they want these made. They don't want them sealed. But again, Titebond 2 is the wood glue that I learned a long, long time ago was used to make the engraving blocks, the 100 little squares. They use Titebond 2. So I try to share that. And again, I'll scrape the glue off and everything later on. The Titebond 2 works great. These are slabs, both 2-inch slabs and 3-inch slabs glued together. And this allows me to make 15-line type or sometimes down to 3-line type. If I do 6-line, I'll do a 3-line filler out of the 2-inch thick maple. So I try not to waste very much. But again, this gives me the options for the engravers, or if people want great big manacles or special big type with no glue joint. The advantage of this is I can make big type with no glue joint, and my machinery likes slabs. I don't try to make it small and thin. It likes slabs. So that's what I do. I've learned pantograph math. This is my pantograph. This is a B-type pantograph. Hamilton's pantographs have the pivot point on the outside of the parallelogram, and we have called those an A-type pantograph. My second small traveling pantograph I take to schools and stuff is like Hamilton, so I give them a chance to use both. And again, the letters are reverse, so I had to learn pantograph math. Thank you, Norb, for all that. I've learned the proper cutting methods and tracing methods and what to do in what order. Thank you, Hamilton, for that. I've learned they sealed their type with shellac. I found that I can get, as a woodworking person, I can get spray shellac, bullseye shellac, or in a can. I use clear. I believe Hamilton uses amber, the amber, and they spray theirs with an automotive spray gun. But again, this is great. If you clean type and take off the shellac accidentally, you can respray this. It's alcohol-based, and it's 50-50 alcohol shellac, just like Hamilton. And it soaks right in. I use tape. I started out using tapered end mills. This is a little 1/32 inch tapered end mill, carbide, and it has 3 flutes, which lets the chips come up and out of the way. I also have learned I can get small straight mills from McMaster Carr up in Aurora, very cheap. These were very expensive, and when I took them to a college the first year and they broke 3 at $50 each, I then went ahead and got the $10 ones, and they work great. And if they snap them off, they snap them off. I don't care. Everyone's learning. But again, this is the type of thing I'm using instead of hand grinding them like Hamilton. I built my own drum sander. Hamilton's was a great big machine, and I went ahead and did some research. I was teaching welding, so I welded up my own and built my own with industrial bearings. And it's very accurate within 2,000s across the surface. And because it's all welded steel, there's no flex. I had to come up with how to get my height in thousandths. So I came up with a wheel at one end, and it's like a teeter-totter, and it's like a wheelbarrow. It goes up and down and allows me several thousandths of control. So again, I just like to design. I like to make things. Here you see a homemade feed belt going through. I put the aluminum on to make it pretty. Here you see an 80 grit pass, and it's worked really well. It's worked really well. I really recommend the Jet. The Jets, if you're trying to buy a commercial one. Most people don't have access to a wood shop to weld up their own. But again, these are slabs on my kitchen counter, ready. They've been polished and they're ready to go to be a big job of type. I do write on the edges how high they are. I try to be very accurate. I use my plate gauge. First thing I bought, my first trim saw and the plate gauge I bought from Dave Churchman. We were at the boutique, and he says, if you're making wood type, you've got to have a plate gauge. So I bought the plate gauge was very rusty, for an exorbitant amount of money, I thought. And for $20, I had a new dial indicator put on it, a new lens, and cleaned it. So it works great. I love it. And again, same thing that Jerry does at Virgin. After you make your slabs, and Adam, you work around and check it every 2 or 3 inches to see if you have any high spots or low spots if you go too far. But and then you work on those with the sanders and get them down before you seal them. Here you see my pantograph running, and it's a small cutter, and it's cutting out one of the first cash words I made. The tracer, I made my own tracers. They come in different sizes. I also discovered that when you laser cut patterns, it gets sticky. So this has a baby powder on it, or talc, to help it slide. Here you see a finished. Here, I've also learned how to be a trimmer. I learned at Hamilton from the lady who taught me. I paid her to teach me how to trim, and much slower than she is, but I've learned it's very fun to teach this skill to young students and to type makers who don't know the little tricks to flicking and stamping. I've also been experimenting with borders. Here you see some ornaments I had made for someone, and the kiln dried wood has so much internal stress to it that it bows. The half rounds that Hamilton uses and my half rounds have no stress, and you can make little 1/8-inch strips and they stay nice and straight. So I've learned how to make wood, how to make strips, how to make borders. Here you see a border I worked on for someone. I believe it's tubs. And the question came up, how many pieces are there? What units are there? Because the specimen books don't tell you what's in a box set of borders. How many of each of the side rails? And what are the side rails even called? I've gone through 4 or 5 names with different people. Corner blocks, everyone agrees with. So this is an example. And then where do you make the break? How do you break? And Hamilton's been very nice about letting me look at their case and see where historically Hamilton would have broken it at. I've done it wrong several times. So this is neat. So I came up with, this is a box set. It's side rails that are 4 units, and then there's some 4 or 3 units, 2 units, 1 unit. And I also go ahead and include a reverse corners, which were not originally there, in case you want to turn it the other way. These printers just keep me on my toes with what they want. And I really appreciate everyone who helped me with this project, who's been going through and measuring their borders and checking for me. So this is the year of the border, except we're not traveling. So I will get working on borders, and I'm helping some people right now make some borders. I also use my jointer to, this is side grain laser cut. I use my woodworking jointer to get the baseline, because when you laser cut it, you aren't guaranteed it's straight, and I can actually get a beautiful finished baseline or top line. Here's a new guard I got to put on my jointer since I stuck my fingers into it. And it has a little feather board that keeps the wood back tight and safe. It's magnetic with rare earth magnets. It really works great. And then here you see me running a piece through to get a baseline on some Tuscan. And he's my nice push stick. So 40 years of teaching woodworking, the old shop teacher didn't use the push stick and he got hurt. So now I use a feather board and I use a push stick every time. Also, I use my half rounds to make things when I first started, because they have no stress. Here you see, and then I had to figure out how to trim them. So the middle part of that is the center of the tree, which is very pretty, I think. But again, I've learned to try and use half rounds, and then I realized I only had 200 and I was going through them. So I went ahead and made Amish maple. Here's trimming. Trimming's been a big lesson. The far left one is correct. The rise should just touch the tangent point of the circle. The middle one is too deep. It has a flat, straight spot, and the right one isn't deep enough. If you don't have the right spacing on the side, and that's you won't get the proper letter spacing. Here you see self-adhesive tape. It's called transfer tape, and I put it on, and it keeps the smoke from getting on the laser. You can also, instead of buying $90 rolls from the laser companies, you can buy a roll for $12 from the vinyl sign making companies. It's exactly the same thing, made by the same company. 3 years ago was the year of the Hamilton Star, and I made a whole bunch of Hamilton Stars and traveled with them for people. Also, last year I started making these catchwords, and also some little ornaments. So again, at the top you can see I tuck in things where I can, but I couldn't begin to, at 5 line, I couldn't begin to pantograph cut this. I couldn't begin to stamp or trim it. So the laser has allowed me to make smaller things for the printers who have small presses more accurately. Also, the laser is a photographic process. So here you see the Rob Roy Kelly chicks. And those were printed right off of a photograph out of a book. Here you see some coaster rings I was experimenting with and did not work very well, so I've made them a different way. Again, on side grain. I have found that when you laser cut a full big slab, the heat from the laser dries out the top and it starts rocking back and forth. And so I clamp all mine down with these clamps and then take it out and leave it in the house for a day, and the humidity in the house comes back in and it ends up being perfectly flat. So again, I do have, so if you ever get tight with a notch, that's what it is. Here are the borders I've been working on, some side grain, some end grain, and I'll be doing more of that. Here you see the bandsaw cutting strips. Here's my laser, which is a 90 watt 12 by 20 full spectrum laser. Lots of you have been contacting me and have lasers, and I have handouts for you. Here you see my half rounds that are left, and then my philosophy. So I know I'm running long, I'm sorry.
We're here for you, Scott.
The more fun times. So here are, what?
I was going to say, what you lack in windows, you make up for in machines.
Yes, I have lots of fun.
This is my small line Pantograph. I have 3. I want to show you really quick. I know there's not much time. Laser cut pattern, an @ sign, Caslon @ sign, and over here a 10 by 12 line block, all surfaced and smooth and ready to go. I've done the Pantograph mat. I know I have the proper tracer and the proper cutter. And now I'm going to cut it real fast. I don't know if you'll be able to hear me or not. Round the pattern twice. The first one does most of the cutting, and the second pass clears the chips. It gives you a fine, smooth edge. And now there's a counter, so I'm going to raise up the cutter, pick up the tracer, drop it in, and go clockwise. That's what Norm taught me, clockwise. And then raise it up and clear the negative space, clear all the counters. Pull it back, put it off, take out the @ and there is the @
Then I throw it on the floor. So, escape. One more, real fast. I think you'll like this one.
This has been great, Scott.
One of the most common questions I get is, how do I prepare and polish the slabs? A little bit of boiled linseed oil, just a little bit of 4F pumice, a finishing sander with 500 grit. And rags, old t-shirts work the best, I think, but you can use terry cloth if you need to. You have to be careful though, sometimes the terry cloth makes a lint. So we do a quick wipe with a dirty rag, and then a second wipe with a clean rag to get the pumice off. And then I take 1200 grit wet and dry sandpaper and put my pad in my hand and I draw it across. block, and the pad of my hand creates a smooth surface. So when you polish it off, it's beautiful and smooth and no mill marks and no sanding marks. And the most important thing is you take the empty orange juice container,
This is important.
half full of water, and all the boiled linseed oil rags go into the rag bottle. That way you don't get a fire, because they will spontaneously combust.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing. So let's see if this works.
Nicely done. Scott, that was absolutely amazing. We all agree you need a YouTube channel, man. You need to share this.
I have a lot of fun. I have people I know all around the world who, are we on? Yeah, I'm talking. You can hear
Yep.
me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have people all around the world who I get advice from. I have printers who have been on my advisory panel for 10 years. I can run it by them, and they'll honestly say, "That's stupid. No printer would really use that," or, "Oh, I wish I had those." I've been very blessed to have people who know facts that I don't know and know little tricks that I don't know, and I couldn't begin to start naming them. I learn all the time. 100 years ago, 100 people knew this, and now, unfortunately, the knowledge is gone. So I'm trying to help, and we're all trying to help other people learn to make type. People say, "You're giving away your secrets." And I go, no, 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 no. I'm sharing the knowledge that needs to be saved and shared. I've learned, Jerry McCormick is coming up next, and she has a slightly different pantograph, but I've learned so much from her. So that's all I have for right now. We'll be answering some questions later on.
That was really wonderful. Thank you. Yes, save your questions for the end. We are now going to Rochester, New York for Jerry McCormick from Virgin Wood Type, who is also celebrating 10 years. And I am going to spotlight you, Jerry, so that you are nice and big, and you are now in the spotlight.
Okay, well, I just switched it around so you don't see me anymore. So this is a broad view of, I'm standing at the doorway into my shop. My son Paul is sitting at the Pantograph. He will be doing the Pantograph demo when we start. But I just wanted to kind of show you, a little bit of what it's like in my shop. Got some prints up and stuff all over the place. Okay, so now I'm going to start talking about anybody who visits my shop. I always tell them that the biggest asset in this, well, maybe I should start really with the story that we bought American Wood Type a little over 10 years ago. The patterns and the Pantograph. So this, I feel that the pattern collection is truly the what is so valuable that we have. We carry an amazing amount of wood type making history in the patterns. So these patterns that we're looking at the moment, the font is called Old Style number 6. The patterns are from Stevenson Blake. I'm hoping you can see this. I don't know whether you can see it or not, but it's stamped SB and Company there on the end of the pattern. Just so everybody gets a little look at that pretty ampersand. So this is a pattern from Stevenson Blake, which is in England. That is because American Wood Type was the distributor for Stevenson Blake hot metal and wood type. Now here's some more patterns. This is Gothic number 735, and this is considered an American Wood Type pattern, but it's also considered a pattern from Acme. American Wood Type acquired many wood type companies over their years of operation. So we managed to have patterns from Acme Wood Type, Allied Wood Type, American Wood Type, Stevenson Blake. And also we have patterns from Empire, and we even have a pattern from Tubbs. So this pattern here we're looking at, this is Gaudy extra bold, or Gaudy old style extra bold. And see how these patterns are, the other patterns were routed. This pattern is tacked. These patterns are very old. They're probably from the beginning of the 1900s, or they might be before that, because I think Empire acquired some of their patterns from other wood type makers in New York City. So that's, and then I'm going to show you another pattern that we know that, and it's kind of, I don't even understand how this can be, but this pattern, this is Old English, and it's American Wood Type sold this, Allied sold it, I think Empire sold it, but Allied and American have it in their catalog at the same time, so I don't quite understand what that is. So, but these are very complicated. This is a very complicated to make font, but very, again, very old pattern. And kind of what tells the age of the pattern, I think, is a lot of times the patina on it and how worn they are, etc. But we have over 400 boxes of patterns, lots of Gothics, and we also have lots of sizes. So these patterns we're looking at here are, most of them are 28 picas. The Gaudy was 24 pica. That seems to be, most of the patterns are that size. A really wide font would probably tend to be 18 picas or 16 picas. Then we have, you know, with particularly a lot of the Gothics, we have them in patterns of 36 pica, 48 pica, and 56 pica. So those larger patterns make your larger wood type. So now I'm going to get into what is our process. So we cut wood up into slabs, but I don't glue my wood together. So I bring it over and I put it so it can only be as long as my fingers. Luckily, I have really big hands, so I can, because this is a 12-inch sanding disc here. So, you know, I sand on here, then I bring it over to my vise, and then I sand it with the finishing sander just to get, you know, the hardest thing is sanding. It is the, you know, Scott will tell you that also. It's really hard to sand. So then it comes over and here it is. This is Papa Bear. This is a Vandercook block leveler. My Vandercook block leveler is big. It runs 3-phase. It went out last week, but it got fixed. So you can see there's the wonderful badge on it. It's got these jaws, and what we do when we're operating it is we wipe down the surface. I'm not gonna run it. And then you put the wood there. So because anything, a little speck of dust would get something off the amount. So again, we've sanded first, then we block level, you know, it goes into the clamp, and then as the machine is running, it gets milled. This machine can mill to the thousandths of an inch, so it's pretty accurate. Then when we're done milling the wood, it comes over and we have also a type gauge. I don't know whether any of you have one like this. And then what we do is we mark off the area that is not type high. Then it gets shellacked. We have a different method than Scott again. But, you know, again, I don't know if I would want to use Scott's method on all these little strips. So, but we've figured out how to get a really smooth coated surface. Oh, as I'm going through my shop, I meant to show you this when I was showing the patterns. This is the Old English patterns I was just showing you. We just recently made this. We'll be adding it to the website once I can, you know, get photography done. So as I'm walking through, you know, you see all sorts of things. So there's the chop saw I used to make up my slabs. See, I got it clamped there. That's the size slab I cut. And there is my dust collector. But we still make lots of dust in the shop. But so then once we have that wood block we were talking about, then it comes over and we run our Hammond trim saw. This thing gets used all the time. And then we make what we call blanks. And you heard Scott talking about blanks too. So then we come over and here is my pantograph. And before we get it running, I just kind of show our pantograph is very different than everybody else's. Paul, you want to move it? I want to see, can you see how the platen is moving as opposed to the bit? So the platen, you know, is holding the wood in, but the bit is stationary, or the end mill is really what it's called. The other thing I wanted to show you, which I find really different, which is kind of amazing, and I'm not sure you can kind of see it. I'm trying to get, but on my pantograph are these settings, and there's these little, these unbolt, and this is how we change the size of what we're cutting. And this little ruler in here rules out, well, 64th of an inch, or 32nd of an inch. 32nd on this side, 64th on that side, which is pretty amazing. So here is the pantograph. My machine is really big and heavy. It's not the kind of thing you want to move. I don't know if you see this. This is like steel, and there's the motor back there, and over here is where the pattern gets put in. Now I'm going to turn on the dust collector. Do you want headphones on, or are you going to run it? Okay, so we're gonna make a letter. Well, Paul just made a second or a third or something really undesirable. Want to undo that?
Okay.
Well, it was almost a cap eye. There we go. I don't know whether you can see it. A ruined piece of type. But on the other side is a G that I made earlier today. So if you look at this, kind of excited about this face, I'm gonna come over here. So these are new patterns that we make that we get laser cut. This is a face called Wake Robin. It's very cool face. It really is. It's so, look at the medial spurs that are on some of the letters. Like, look at that U. So that's that's coming out real soon. It's designed by Carl Cosgrove of Monotype Corporation, and Monotype is releasing the type also. And this is just a sneak peek at the chromatic type we're making right now. And the lowercase is not a lowercase, it's a cap and small cap, which makes this a very unusual wood type. But I have found through a whole crazy mess of emails, email chain from this last weekend, that there were caps and small caps, but they were a rarity. So I don't know whether you gathered when I talked to you, but the focus of virgin wood type is making type. So here is a look at, these are the patterns that we make, that we now offer. And what I have been doing in my time of COVID-19 is going into the pattern collection and adding to the type that we make. So, and then there's more patterns up there. So, but again, you know, when you have 400 boxes of patterns and they've all been gone through wonderfully by Jim Greishaber, and we've tried to figure out where they came from, and we've identified, I don't know, maybe 75% of them. There's a lot of fonts that are not in any of the catalogs that we have of the known type companies that American Wood Type was supposed to have purchased. So they're mystery patterns. But I think that's all for me. Now you're going to get to hear from Adam Wynn, and I'll be ready for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. That was really wonderful. I loved seeing that you guys have different processes, and we went like from wood to cut type. That was great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So like Jerry said, we are now going to Iowa with the Wynns. This is Tammy and Adam Wynn from the Red Door Press, and they are going to show us part of their process.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Adam. This is Tammy. I think we know. So we are the operators of the Red Door Press, and as seeing that we didn't have enough hobbies to keep us busy, about 5 years ago, we got a tip about where we could find a Vandercook block leveler, and jumped in our truck and scooted over to Illinois, and managed to get ourselves one of the number 11, we'll show you here in a minute, just like Jerry had and showed you a minute ago, and have spent the past 5 years very slowly putting together an operational, hopefully operational, wood type shop. We are not quite there yet. We're still working on putting it together. Oh. Okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't going to be talking twice here. And so we have very slowly, with the help of Scott and with lots of phone calls and advice and helpful presence several times, just this year gotten our block leveler up and running. It works now, which is amazing, and managed to acquire, I think, all of the other tools we need to produce wood. We don't have a pantograph yet. We don't have a laser yet. That's planned in the future. But for now, we're just getting acquainted with the process of making the wood type high and of a quality that you guys would want to print with. You guys are going to see a lot of the same stuff you saw in Scott's shop and in Jerry's shop and with Rob's stuff. But I just want to kind of walk you guys around and show you our shop, and hopefully this will work. Steph, do you want to switch to the other input?
Yes, I can. We've got a nice big group, so here we go. And now you are spotlighted and just, ooh, take us on a smooth journey.
Okay. Can you guys hear us okay?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So we're going to do just a brief walkthrough here of all of the tools that we've managed to acquire that will hopefully have us producing wood for years to come. So like you saw in Scott's shop, we have a bandsaw used for cutting beams down into strips, which will then get glued together into slabs. I am using a jet drum sander, a 1632. This has kind of been my latest hiccup or stumbling block, is getting this thing to sand in a way and get a finish that I like. And so we're still working on that and have been playing around getting that to work right. We have a dust collection system. We have a jointer for scoring up blocks. We have the ham and trim saw, just like you saw in Jerry's. This obviously gets a lot of use. And then we have our number 11 Vandercook block leveler. So this has been what we've been working on for several years now, getting it to work right. And with the help of Scott and my friend Zach, who is an electrician, we finally managed to get it up and running. It is really noisy, so I'm probably not going to fire it up for you guys. But as Jerry kind of showed you, the principle is that you clamp the block down in here. It's got this really clever device where these slanted teeth, when you close the jaws, pull the block down really, really snug against the bed. That way you're getting a nice, even sand across the surface. It's got this really gnarly cutting head down here that spins insanely fast to give you that really nice, smooth cut. And basically, this thing is really noisy and terrifying when you're using it. So this has been the project for a while. It's taken us a while because we also have day jobs and we also have the print shop. So you're actually getting a glimpse of where the Red Door Press used to be as we got our new space a couple years ago. We've had more opportunity to convert this space into wood shop. But you can see that I'm working with slabs just like Scott does, working on taking this rough finish slab down, hopefully into something that's going to be a little smoother and a finish more usable for finish type. And then we have our plate gauge over here, just like Scott has. Mine is not as pretty as his, but we're working on that. But it's a must-have tool. And that's my shop.
Yay.
Let's see.
Questions
Thank you
and
so much.
answers now.
Yeah, this is question time. I know you guys have been sitting on them for a long time. So what do you guys want to know more about?
Hey Jerry, I saw some of your sorry, some of your patterns were double-sided.
Yes.
How is that harder to use?
No.
Or is it, since I don't obviously do this, I just watch Rob. So it interested me that that you could use them on both sides.
Well, sometimes like if like an I has that, it would rock down when it's on the bottom of another letter. But I just have, all the trim offs of making wood type. I have, everybody comes and buys all my stuff. I have so much of that stuff around. I just shove it down under until it's not slanted anymore, and then we make it. But that's it.
And did you notice that Hamilton and Jerry both you cut a design on both ends of their strips, and that way I do them one at a time. I've tried their way, and I keep swinging up into the good one and ruining it. So, but Hamilton and Jerry both, is that right, Stephanie? Both do it on both ends.
We
and
do,
then trim
and it was
and make the next letter. So
Yeah, it was a time-saving mechanism because they were paid by the piece. And so if you could cut a letter at one end of the wood and then cut a letter at the other end, you could then cut those off and then use the wood in between. So they could get paid more, the factory workers. And I will say George Leash, who, Scott, you mentioned Norbrilski a lot. In case anybody doesn't know Norbrilski, we affectionately call him our rock star at Hamilton. He passed away a couple years ago. May he rest in peace. He was a printer. He was a type maker. He was a pantograph operator. He was a pattern maker. He showed Scott how to make type. He taught his daughter, George Leash, how to make type. And she still makes type at Hamilton. So she is going to, she couldn't make this call, but she is going to do a whole ham hang on how we make type at Hamilton here coming up within the next month or two. So it'll be nice to see all the different methods. I think it's great.
What's the most fun thing to cut out of type? Or
I
type?
say an S because it just sort of swoops and it just flows. That's what I say, an S. What do you think, Scott?
Most fun thing.
I agree. Anything you don't have to raise up to do count. But to pantograph cut, I love doing dots. I do a lot of texture dots and with different rings patterns and circle patterns, and people overprint with them. So I would say making a whole bunch of dots. It's simple. It uses the pantograph very well. I also do dots with ampersands reversed out of them, ampersand dots. And on those, I use the laser to cut the ampersands, and then I go and cut them on the trim saw. Then I go and make the round dot part with the pantograph. So they're kind of a combined thing. I'm trying to use all the different technology I can. Anyone? Kim?
I do have a question for Virgin, for Jerry. You said at one point that you wouldn't do anything with one end of the wood because it wasn't type high or it wasn't the right height. Will the block leveler only go so far?
No, it's just, that's all sanding. All the low spots are sanding. So, the block leveler will do, perfect milling every time. But the hardest part is sanding the wood completely level. So the low spots, that's where we check every block of wood randomly. So like that block that you were looking at probably got checked in 6 or 8 spots. And if we find a low spot, then we mark it out with a Sharpie. So that black marked off spot was low, but it's from the sanding, not the block.
And when I see Jerry posts things and shows different pieces she's making, I'm so impressed. She does a lot of, is it carbon paper? How do you proof the type?
Yeah, I proof everything. So like here, we just shipped Franklin Gothic. So here's some Franklin Gothic that got proofed, and it will go, sometimes you miss a trim. So, you're trying to find that, but also I know everything's prints okay. And then I look to see, I might want to touch up, usually it's the M's. Might be a V or a W. Those are the hardest to hand trim.
I have a question, I guess, for Jerry. I noticed, Jerry, it says on your website that your type is 0.921 inches high, and I wondered why you go for that and not 0.918.
Because all the old wood type makers made the type higher than 918. So, and I think it has a lot to do with the amount of surface area that you're inking and the amount of surface area that you're trying to print. And I think that little bit above 918 just helps printing. But I'm following the old guys.
If you look at historic specimen books from back then, you'll see that, especially American wood type, tubs all brag on every page. Our type is 921, 921.
But
So
Scott, yours is you have those slabs marked 0.918 on the side.
yes, I go for 918 because that's what Hamilton was doing, and historically, that's what the companies Morgan Wilcox and the 5 or 6 specimen books I work out of all specify the other. The American wood type was 921.
We use, when we're cutting stuff in the shop, small stuff we do 918, but larger things that take up more surface area, like a poster block or something that's 10 or 15 inches wide, we'll make 921 so that we get better impression on the large cylinder press.
Cool, thanks.
I've got a question for Scott.
Yes.
Okay, you showed a real close-up of a router bit. What size was that router bit? It was really small.
That was a 1/16 inch, 3-fluted tapered end mill from McMaster Carr. If you look at your historic wood type, you will see that Hamilton did it too. Everyone did it. They ground a 3-degree or 4-degree bevel onto the side of their cutters, and we're calling that a cantilever, a little bit of a base to it. And so I was originally, historically, I didn't know any, I was learning from what Hamilton had. I was buying tapered end mills, carbide end mills with that 3-degree slope. And I assumed every company that made type historically all had a 3-degree slope on the side. And the slope on the side of the character gives you your letter spacing. That's where the letter spacing comes from. Until I started looking and talking to Dave Shields, and we started measuring when I was down at his school, and Tubbs used 4, and different companies use 3.5. But within the company, for example, Hamilton always uses 3 degrees on all their wood. And Dave thinks that might be a way to identify type that doesn't have a clean back to be able to tell that. So again, the bevel on the side comes with that. If I make something small though, I often just use a small straight end mill, but I go all the way down with carbide to 1/32 of an inch. And you would think, boy, that would just snap off. But as long as you go slow and let the chips come up, you can use it. If you use a 2-mil cutter or a 1-mil cutter, flute cutter, the chips can't clear and it binds up, and that's what snaps the cutters off. So you can buy, it's called a small tapered end mill, and they come in 3 or 4 different degrees of slope. You can email me and I'll send you all that. More Scott at Morewood Type.
Can you show us on a letter that slope you're talking about? Can you show us on a piece? I'm not quite sure I understand.
Yeah, just a second. I have one right here.
It's like the beard and cast type.
That's what I was wondering.
I'm trying to find something straight. Give me just a second.
James Greashopper's trying to show you. He's got a fancy ampersand over there.
But again, I don't always use, if I'm using something really big or something historic, then I do use the taper. I don't know if I can get it up here or not. But
just even if, I think I know where you're talking about, but I just wanted to.
You can see right here by my finger. The
oh, right, okay.
So the side of it, come on type people, is that beard?
Yeah.
The beard is, if you look at your wood type, you will see that slope on there. And the advantage of it is if you put an H and an I next to each other, that slope is when you trim to the very bottom of the slope, and that gives you your letter spacing.
Got it.
With wood type.
Gotcha. Can I ask another question as well, if I may? And this can go to any of you who are cutting, and I came in late again, sorry, apologies. Can you talk a little bit about somebody just mentioned the router bits. How much use do you get out of those? Do you hand sharpen them? Do you, I'm just curious about the bits themselves.
Well, I use carbide, uncoated carbide. And I'm sure there's someone in China making them from McMaster Carr in Aurora, Ohio. I have a huge collection. They ship the next day. But they last me, I would say maybe 700 or 800 cuts, pieces of type before it even starts to think about it. It doesn't dull. Carbide doesn't dull, and at $10 each, you just get rid of them. I do have some bigger ones that I actually sharpen on a diamond honing stone, but you can tell when it starts getting dull. You will feel the resistance. There's a happy speed, I called it. As you feed it, you can feel the chips are coming out, and it'll give you just the right amount of speed. The demonstration one I did was with a big cutter. If I'd have gone that fast with a really small cutter, like a 16 or smaller, it probably would have snapped it off. You have to have room for the chips to come out.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Well, I was going to say we didn't get into that. We have a bit. It's the 1/64th bit. I call it cutting with a needle. There's a few fonts that we have that we just have to use it on. But a lot of times now it's just like, okay, let's just hand trim that spot. Or let's see, sometimes we've been redrawing because a lot of times those are on the dollar signs, and I've been having Jim Greisaber redraw the dollar signs so we don't have to use the 1/64th bit, because it's just, one thing, they break really easy. When I run it, I'm like saying this mantra to myself the whole time: go slow, Jerry, go slow, Jerry, go slow, Jerry, because it's so hard to go that slow, and they're so easy to snap, and those are expensive, those 1/64ths. So I'm trying to never use one again, but there are some times when we have to use it. That Old English I was showing had about 5 letters that we couldn't fit into, well, we couldn't fit the follower in. So it didn't matter what size bit we used. So they just ended up getting all handwork in certain areas of the font.
Hey,
Jerry, if I may, again, something we didn't cover.
Okay, who's asking?
Tony from Texas.
Stephanie, it's just Tony. I was going to ask Jerry, what were you doing before you purchased the wood type company?
I've been a graphic designer for over 25 years.
Okay.
One question I was going to ask, because I know
something I didn't go over, and
I have
it's
a
one of the
question.
interesting things to teach.
What do you raise their hand?
Well, Scott, can Jim Sheridan ask his question?
Jim Sheridan.
Yeah, go for it, Jim.
Of course.
Howdy, this is a logistics question, and I'm going to ask each of you, and I'm going to tell you what I think just for the ease of the conversation. Where do you work? So, Scott, I think you work in the basement of a early 20th century home, it looks like. Jerry, you on the same property, I'm guessing, but it's a more contemporary house. And Rob, I think you go to an industrial building and you do not work at home. So I'll let each of you answer succinctly.
I do. I work in the basement of my home. My wife has graciously allowed me to take over some of it, and I've taken over more of it. I have 2 dust systems, a big 4-inch dust system, tornado type. And then I have my daughter and my son-in-law bought me a micron size dust system for the fines. And so far it hasn't gotten into the rest of the house. I have an all electric house, so I have a lot of circuits. I taught house wiring, so I've run a lot of power into different machinery. I don't know how much my home electric bill is actually, how much of that is actually the shop, especially the laser. The laser runs, takes quite a bit of power, but it's worked out well. I can go upstairs if I don't want to. The neighbors know I do this. I help them with a lot of stuff, so the neighbors cut me some slack, and but it's worked well. My wife thinks she keeps pointing out shops that are for sale, rent. office shop space. He said that you could move everything into that, and then you could go over there, and I get my basement back. But so far, it's working out pretty well.
Okay, I'll speak next. I have a detached garage, which is where all the dust making happens. Though hand trimming does create a lot of dust chips. But if, as Amy Rao knows, or other people that have been to my house, about 3/4 of my house has been taken over by virgin wood type. I mean, how else could I house 400 boxes of patterns? Plus I have a Vandercook in my son's old bedroom, and that's where I proof the type. And I have a bunch of wood type in drawers, most of it made by Virgin. I have some old wood type. I have shipping supplies, and I have inventory that I keep, and no typeface. I don't have wood type as inventory. That's all the shapes and ornaments and ampersands and stuff for my inventory. But my house, it has taken over, definitely taken over.
Rob?
Don't forget about Adam and Tammy either.
They're next.
Yeah, so I currently have a small place in the back of Kim's shop, and then the landlord at our building kind of lets me store equipment out in one of the back hallways. But eventually, the plan is to bring the wood type stuff home, so I can get a little better climate control for my wood blanks and things like that. Where I can store stuff out in the building now, it's just not really conducive to keeping wood where it won't crack or split or warp. So for the time being, it'll kind of be between both worlds, but the ultimate goal is actually to move it home to our house where I can work on it in the evenings and much like Scott, be able to go back and forth between family life and the wood shop.
Adam, Tammy.
Adam and Tammy.
So we are very fortunate to have a 700 square foot detached garage behind our house, which is like 3 times the size of every other garage in our neighborhood. And that's what let us start the Red Door Press and get stupid amounts of stuff. So when we moved into mainframe, the idea was the garage would be freed up for more restoration work and the wood shop and things like that. Well, about 500 square foot of that is still just stuff that has accumulated. And the rest of it is our wood shop. So we're right behind the house right now.
Something we didn't go over, and we've mentioned it, is, and it's a learning experience, is trimming and stamping. And again, as I mentioned, I grind, I don't know if you can even see them on the camera. I'm sorry, I should have taken a better picture. These are hand ground steel stamps out of old files and center punches. And they were used to stamp the top point of the M and the V. So many places you can't get the pantograph cutter into it, and no matter how small a cutter you use, you still have a radius to deal with. So stamping and grinding steel stamps has been a whole new thing. I used to do engraving and taught woodworking, but yeah, people tried to, when they first start doing this, they tried to use gravers. They've tried different things. I know Jerry uses an engraving tool, wood carving tool.
I use the stamps, but I also use this thing here called a Flex-A-Cut. And I don't know whether anybody is familiar with that, but this is like kind of the smallest one they make. And I don't know if you can see, it's kind of curved. Someone just turned me on to, where did it go? Here it is. To this, I've never done this before, but I'm stropping my Flex-A-Cut. But I actually love the Flex-A-Cut. It's got like these little angles on it that like conform to your hand. I have a daisy wheel thing that Scott Moore designed that he lent us his and we made our own daisy wheel thing that clamps the wood so that you can like turn and work at any angle. I do use the stamping or whatever you want to call these things, these handmade tools. But, you know, particularly for corners, you know, a corner you just kind of flick with the knife. It's pretty quick. And also when you have to go in and actually do something so I don't have to use that little tiny 1/64 bit. Again, the knife, we just go in with the knife. But there was a font I just made that it was so narrow that I couldn't get in with this. So I was using my X-Acto knife to trim the corners of a lot of the letters.
And again, what you use to trim with is historically, this is, I don't know if you can see it or not, this is a replica of one that they had on the table at Hamilton. And I was told that it was held in a certain way so that they could flick without getting carpal tunnel. And so I've made several reproductions, but I use X-Acto knives. Rory Sparks in Portland uses scalpels with removable, interchangeable blades and gets a trim. I have a friend in Australia, and he just uses like a pen knife, a pocket knife, but it has to be sharp and it has to be a tool you're comfortable with, because you might be doing it for 5 hours. Greg Walters came and cut a beautiful German font off of patterns he had, which I think they were French patterns, as part of Aaron's Kickstarter. And we ground him 5 different stamps that didn't match anything we've ever done, because the font, the German, I don't know what you call it, the German, like Old English looking stuff, they were special stamps ground just for his job. And he trimmed all his type, and he made a whole bunch of it, I think in 1 day or 2 days. So stamping is important. It's a job you got to have. And again, the women were almost always the trimmers and the stampers and the finishers. Better fine motor skills, better repeated tasks. They didn't show up drunk as much as the men's do, and they only had to pay them $60